goes on. So if there's any of those services that we can be of assistance, please feel free to reach out to me. We have muted everyone for our speakers' benefit. If you have questions, please use the chat room. You can find the chat room in the ribbon either below your screen or in the upper right-hand corner. You just hover with your mouse over the show conversation. I will be monitoring that, so we will ask questions as we go through each section so that we keep you on target. And then Ann will also go back through it one last time before we sign off at the end of the workshop. So very pleased to have Ann Sharp on the call today. She's the founder of Excellent Admin. She finished both bachelor's and master's degree from Walsh University, worked in the accounting field for over 10 years, been teaching QuickBooks for 4 years. She has a specialty in small business, and she's an advisor with the SBDC, and we're very, very grateful to have her on board. I did mention earlier the session is being recorded, and it will eventually be found on our website for anybody that maybe misses the first part or has to step away. And like I said before, you do have the PowerPoint. If you have other suggestions or recommendations for other topics, please feel free to put that in the chat room as well. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to Ann.
So hi guys, we're going to go through some basic high-level review of what QuickBooks Online has the ability to do. So today we're not necessarily going to be learning to enter data, but we're going to be learning to navigate the platform, set up some of our customization features, and obviously answer questions along the way. And as I cover each area, I go into more detail. The PowerPoints have elaborate screenshots so that you can go back to it. But obviously, as you'll see, some of the icons require hovering. And then in order for me to take a screenshot, I have to move the mouse and then I lose the hover. So you'll want to take some notes in some of those areas, and I will point those out for you. And then obviously we'll touch base on, the different levels of QuickBooks. So most of you probably already have QuickBooks Online. But you might learn with going through the training today that you might not have the right package. So I want to talk about the packages a little bit just to make it so that we understand why we pick certain packages based on what you as a business owner individually might be trying to accomplish, okay? Because when you go to their homepage, they give you these ideas, but we don't really know what we need right away until maybe we have a little bit more education on it, or we meet with an accountant and those types of things. And I'm going to explain the importance of some of those while we're doing it. So I just went directly to the QuickBooks Online. As a business owner, as a startup, small business, like most of you guys are, you immediately go, oh my gosh, $12 a month. This is really inexpensive. Inexpensive doesn't actually always give you exactly what you need. I usually recommend that everybody gets the essential package. That's because you have multiple users and it gives you some other options here. So at $12 a month, you have one user. So the user would be you. That's it. You don't get anybody else, which means that in order for your accountant to review your financials or anybody to do financial planning with you throughout the year, or even help you with categorization, you have to give them your username and password. And then if something were to change, so you were to categorize something as continuing education, because in your area, that's what you might have to pay for, right? And then I look at it as, well, that sounds like more like a consultant. I might move it to consulting. And then now it's been moved, but nobody knows who moved it because you were all sharing the same username and password. So one user, unless you're the only one that's ever going to do your books and you're going to print a profit and loss and balance sheet for your accountant at the end of the year, one user usually doesn't cut it for us. If you do invoicing through QuickBooks, you're going to need more than one user because you're going to want to know who creates the invoices. You can track your income and expenses, no problem. Tax deductions, fine. You're not really going to use mileage in QuickBooks Online, so that's kind of a moot point. Cash flow, if you use QuickBooks properly, meaning every time you use your debit card, you're putting it into QuickBooks, then you would know exactly what your cash flow is because it would be accurate based on any checks that you had written. Odds are most of us as small business owners do it once a month. So you're going to manage cash flow internally with knowing that you took in this much money and of this much money you paid this in expenses and monitor it that way. Steve Schillig does a really good cash flow chart. I've seen him do it with a couple of my clients. So I would recommend, doing that outside books if you're not going to use it correctly. Then you have invoices. You can accept payments. That's obviously unlimited. You have your normal reports. So this would be profit and loss, accounts receivable, accounts payable. That's probably most of the reports you're going to need unless you do project costing. In enhanced, you do get the project costing. So it just depends there. Estimates, that stuff's all normal. Here's where it starts to split. Paying contractors. The simple gives you the ability to manage the contractor. The essential gives you the ability to actually print your own your own 1099s, which is important at the end of the year. Bills, if you want to enter bills and then pay bills in QuickBooks so that you can track how much you have in expenses, you lose that in the simple. You don't have the ability to do that anymore. So you definitely need that for the essentials. And then if you're going to track time, a lot of people do manual time cards because we're smaller and we don't want to spend, a bunch of money on a time clock, but you can manage the time in the essentials. They use, oh gosh, what is it called? I've used it before. It has a geolocator on your phone, and every time your employee bumps from location to location, clock them in. It's actually pretty cool. If you're out in the field, like construction, working on projects and stuff like that. So then if you get up into the bigger package, which they call the most popular, which is the plus, you get 5 users. 5 users is maybe extreme unless you have multiple partners in a company. 3 users gives you, an office person, and your accountant. So those should be about the 3 people that should be in your books. And then obviously if you have a partner, stuff like that, then you can do that. QuickBooks does not give you the ability to just buy an extra user. So you can't just say, well, can I just spend $5 more a month and get 4 users? You have to jump the packages. They do that kind of as all or nothing. And then this gives you the inventory tracking, which QuickBooks Online is not particularly great at. And then the project costing. Now, the only time I ever recommend advanced is if you're a huge nonprofit and you have tons and tons and tons and tons of employees, like 60 plus employees and so on. Usually as a nonprofit, you get the advanced for free. So you would do that because you're going to need multiple users because you need each head of each department to be in there. So I don't know that any of that's going to apply to the guys maybe on the call, but it gives you an idea of kind of the different stages that we have with what you can purchase. Okay. So we're going to play around in a portal that looks a little bit different from you guys. It's just because I'm set up as an accountant and I'm going to go in. And so I have a couple things that I don't put on the PowerPoint for you guys because you're not going to need to see it. Because your portal wouldn't look like this. So like you guys aren't going to get something like this because you guys are not an accounting firm. So when I click into my accounting firm, I get an actual list of customers that are listed here, and you guys would never see this. It will open up to what a normal customer is to you. So let's do this one. So this would be what you guys would see when you log in. You would immediately fall into your dashboard. Okay. So when you fall into your dashboard, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the dashboard today. Because you can set these widgets up and change them and move them and everything like that based on what you're trying to see. And so it's really, these are the defaults. This is what it gives you when it's like, well, you have invoices created, you have expenses created, here's your profit and loss for the year, our bank accounts that we have synced up, and then it shows trends. So you can do it a couple different ways. We're going to just play around with going over what each of these means and then kind of go from there. So your company is always going to be at the top here. You won't have a drop down arrow, but this will be here. You can click away things to make things bigger or smaller. Your here, you're going to have journal entries. You're going to have the ability to look at reports. You're going to be able to reclassify transactions. You won't have all of these. Some of these are accountant tools, but the ones I covered are the ones you'll have, no problem. Then if you go over here in the corner where our gear icon is, you're going to have where you can order checks if you choose to order them through Intuit. You're going to have the ability to import data. If you're changing from desktop to online, you can do your desktop data. You can export data. So if you need to port out your customer list or your item list so that you can clean out your inventory or things that you don't sell anymore. Reconciling budgeting. QuickBooks Online has an amazing budget feature. It's better than any other tool out there, I think personally, because it actually, once you put the budget in, it will compare to what you're actually spending each month and tell you what percentage of your budget you're at, instead of having to build an Excel document to do it that way. Organizations that I work with that have the budget feature that they're using, they still spend the time to build it in Excel so that they know what they're looking at. Then somebody like me will put it in, and then they don't do the formula to see what the difference is or how far in or behind they are in the budget. They let QuickBooks do that for them, but they do still map it out in Excel. You know, old habits die hard. We're paper hoarders as accountants, is what I tell people. You have products and services, reoccurring transactions. So QuickBooks Online is really good with doing reoccurring transactions and setting up those. So if you know every month you pay a car payment and you know your car payment's a fixed amount, you can go ahead and set that in. You're still going to have to adjust a car payment because your principal and interest amount will change, but you can put up the manual transaction to at least make sure that the expenses coming out of the bank account and your cash flow in there stays accurate. You're going to have the ability to set up your accounts and settings, manage users, you know, work with your chart of accounts. So these are kind of your main widgets on this side. This is our main navigation bar over here on the left side. And this would be one of those things where like I have to hover to get this to come up. So you may not have this picture. As soon as I go to click away, it goes away. So those would be one of the areas as we're going that you guys might want to take notes. And then as your QuickBooks Online gets to know what you're doing, it tries to help you. So it's not always the smartest technology because it doesn't recognize every gas station we go to or every contractor we use. So you have to get it to start to remember that stuff, but it will become a creature of habit, meaning it will start to recognize transactions because they built an algorithm for it to do that. So in here, one of the first things he sees on here is his income. So it'll tell you how much is paid in the last 30 days, what you have in past due invoices based on the terms you set for somebody, and then how much you have in open invoices. It doesn't tell us necessarily how new the open invoices are from here, but we have the ability to see that on another report, which we'll go over later today. But you do get to see like a high level overview, and it gives you for the last year. Then your expenses, it's going to show you the main categories that you use. So he uses payroll, general and admin, marketing, and then everything else. And it's going to tell us of this 13,000, you know, what category went where. Some of the bigger expenses you guys might have would be costs of goods sold. Payroll may be a big one. Rent and utilities are another good chunk that you might have. Supplies might be another big one. So your categories will be a little bit different based on what we use inside of there. And then you're going to have your profit and loss. So it's going to be your total income versus total expenses. And then as you see here, it says 9 to review. We'll go over what that means when we get into actually entering transactions, but it will let you know what's going on inside of there. And then this bank module here, I don't usually put here. I let him do it because he likes to see it. It's a snippet of the bank account. So basically anybody that logs in can see what your bank balances are, how much money you have, or what's going on. They're not accurate until you categorize all your transactions necessarily. But I don't want people to see that right away when I jump in. I want to know, like, I should know what's in my accounts to not necessarily need to see some of this. So this is just an extra one that he does like to look at when he gets in here every once in a while. So now we're going to go up here and look at our users. So it's really important to have multiple users because what it does is it fingerprints who does the work so that if it's wrong or something deleted, we know who did it. So I'm going to show you a couple things. Let's see here if I can get it to populate. a couple things that show you what it looks like when there's an issue. And so you can see what it means to fix the issue. And usually you find the issues, obviously, when you go to reconcile your bank account, which is making sure that all your transactions match the bank statement each month to make sure you didn't miss any expenses or that the bank didn't make any errors. Oh, nope, it definitely is. This one doesn't have any errors. Let's see if I can look at. So like for here, so it says it was reconciled by Ann. So I'm the accountant for this client. I would reconcile it for them. But if he got in here and did it, then it would say it was reconciled by him. So it's going to fingerprint your reports that you would print out when you're doing the reconciliation. It's going to watch the history. It's going to even go down to each individual transaction to tell you who put it in and why it was and where it was categorized. So for me, this is really important at the end of the year because sometimes as a business owner, you might get in there and go, oh no, this isn't the way it needed to be, or oh, this was forgotten, and the books might be reconciled and you're going to fix the transaction, and in fixing it, we throw something off on the other side. It happens, especially with checks, like if the check number ends up being wrong or something like that, and you try to enter it correctly. If we don't adjust the transaction that's already in there and we enter it again, then you have duplicates, but you also have an additional expense in here, which makes your it's different. So if I know who does that, then I can go to them and go, hey, what were you thinking when you did this? Let me see how I can help you. Or if a client deletes an invoice or voids an invoice, you know, if a staff member does that, then you can figure out why. Well, why would you void this invoice for this client? You know, you have the ability to fingerprint it. It also creates accountability across the board for those that are inside of your QuickBooks and using it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is going to be how important it is to protect your data. So I'm a small business owner. The only person that gets to see my financial activity is my husband, other than stuff that I choose to share for training purposes, which obviously, as you guys know, accounting changes every day. So the numbers that you guys would see aren't accurate anyways in 2 days. So it's not a huge deal there. But I don't think that your staff needs to see whether you're super cash positive or if you're really struggling cash flow wise, because that can create fear and it can create uncertainty as an employee, which obviously we don't want. So if you go up here to your gear icon and you go over here to your manage users, it's going to upload a user. Okay. Now you have users and then you have accounting firms. So I go in under an accounting firm because if you put me in as a user and I go to do a bank reconciliation and then something gets adjusted, I cannot undo the bank reconciliation as just a user, but I can do it as an accountant and you can do it as the master admin. So I make sure everybody puts me as an accounting firm. But if you're adding an office secretary who just needs to be able to do estimates or invoicing or enter bills, you just need a user. So if I go ahead and hit add a user, it's going to ask me, is it a standard user or a company admin? And are we going to be using time tracking for them? I'm going to just do a standard user. Now you get to pick the access levels that you have. So you can give them all access, you can give them none access, and you can give them limited access. So this person we want to have limited. I have no problem with them seeing customers and vendors, okay? And as you click it, it tells you what they can see then. So they can enter invoices, they can charge credit cards, they can delete statements, they can receive payments for customers. And then it says what they can't do. They cannot print checks, they cannot make bill purchases, they cannot edit or delete accounts on hand. They will not view the bank register. I think that's a very important one because most of us just don't want them to see what's in the bank. Obviously, they have an idea of what what the invoices are or get the mail, that type of thing. They can't set up multi-currency, certain things that they don't necessarily need to see. And then if you put in vendors, then, they still can't delete certain things or view the bank registry, but they have a little bit more access up here. If you say they have none access, then they can't use any of the features and I wouldn't create them as a user. And if you give them all access, then they can see absolutely everything and adjust and change everything, which may or may not be a good thing pending what you're trying to do. Okay. So I would do limited for this purpose and then keep moving. Now it says, do you want this user to add or edit or remove users? No. Because if you do, that's fine, but I doubt it. But you can give them the ability to view them so they can say, well, we're out of users, but here are our users. And then you can go, oh, well, we don't need this user anymore, right? When you change staffs or change hands, stuff like that. And then do you want the user to edit company info? I would say no. This gives them the ability to change your settings, preferences, company name, EIN, address, phone number, those types of things. I wouldn't probably give them that. That should be set up with you guys to begin with. And then do you want them to manage your subscription? I would say no, because it's going to be tied to a credit card. If you want to give them view access so they can see exactly what subscriptions we're on, whether you're taking payments from QuickBooks Online or just doing it for this reoccurring subscription, or whether you have payroll on here. They may need to be able to see these three things when they're trying to help you through things, but they probably won't. So I'm going to leave all three options of these as no. And then you want to go ahead and create the information here. So I'm going to do
Yeah, it's not to tell you, you gotta put that turkey strap on the hydraulic cover to make that thing run. So I figured that
And I'm going to have Deanna mute everybody again. So if you unmute yourself, and I think we'll get that background noise out.
Nope, not a problem. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So then you can see here, so now I've set it up right here, okay? Now, when you add a user, they have to create their own username and password, and they're going to get an email. So let me open up my email here so that you guys can see what that invitation looks like, so you know what you're looking for. So this is the email. It says you have been invited to QuickBooks Online Essential. And then it says what the company name is, has invited you. And then if you're ready to start, you have to hit let's go. So this is going to redirect you to a page where you can either sign in with credentials you already have, or you're going to set up one because you don't have one already. Okay. So I don't want to do this go all through this setup, which is just username, password. Well, actually, I'll just do it because it'll be easier this way. Oh. Okay. Can you guys still see the screen?
Yes.
It doesn't want to let me actually sign in because I'm already technically on this account. So I'm going to but when you go from the email to actually sign in, it creates the username and password with the information that you got in here from the link you get. So you'll want to go in and type in, email address is this, which like you saw, it does populate it for you from the email. And then when you do that, you sign in with your password. And then you go in and it's going to be like, welcome to the team. And you'll see then their dashboard with whatever is on it that you're allowed to see based on the users that you have set up and the access you set up. Do you guys have any questions about users? Like adding a user and and the access that they have?
Nothing in the chat room yet, Ann. And just a reminder for those that are on the call, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat room, and we'll get Ann to respond to them to the best of her ability.
Perfect. Now let me flip you guys back over to the screen. Okay, so then obviously now you've created a user, right? So now we need to delete users. So I have too many users now. I want to delete the user we just created. It's that simple. They no longer can log in. If they log into their Intuit account, just because you delete the user doesn't mean that they don't have an Intuit account still. They just won't be able to see your company anymore. The company won't exist as far as they're concerned. So deleting them this way does that. Now, they don't get a notification that you've deleted them. So don't be embarrassed if you're like, well, I got a new accountant or I got a new CPA because there's some ill will or, that stuff happens in business. They don't get a notification that said that you've deleted them from their file. They just won't be able to see it if they log back in. Okay. So I never want you to be fearful of it. It's really simple to do this if, you guys grow and you change email addresses. I got married, so my email went from A Daily to A Sharp. So then I had to go back in and add myself again to all my customers, right? To go in and do it the other way. So you can do that very simply. The only person that can delete is the person that is the super admin on the company. So you want to pay attention to that unless you've given somebody else access. Like as an accountant, I can do it. But I don't have any reason to usually do that for a client unless they tell me something specific. Okay. Now, if somebody says, oh my gosh, I never got the email, or I deleted it because it looked spammy or not quite right, you can go to whatever user it is and you can hit edit. And you can resave all of this stuff again to make sure if you've spelled it correctly. And then under actions, you can resend it. Now, I don't have one that I can resend because it's already active, but you will have the ability there's a button that pops up right where my mouse is here that gives you the ability to resend it. So that way, I would say if in 3 or 4 days you notice that somebody hasn't gotten into your file and they were supposed to be, I would make sure that to resend them, it like nudges them and reminds them. Intuit does it too. After like a day, if they haven't gotten into it, it'll be like, hey, you haven't done this yet. And so that you get another email on that end. It does not expire. The invitation doesn't expire. So pay attention to that, because you want to make sure that if somebody, like, you invite them and then they work for like a week and then they never logged in, you still want to make sure you delete them. You want to make sure you still clean that up. Okay. So that adds in users and accounts. And this, obviously you see here, there's 2 tabs here, accountant and user. And to be honest, I can delete that user because I'm over here already. So I didn't need to be duplicate. That was probably for training purposes as well. So, okay. So then let's look at preferences. Okay. So when you go up to your gear icon here and you go to accounts and settings, this is going to show you very basic information. Okay. So if you have a logo, QuickBooks Online makes it super easy to upload your logo. It'll show up on your invoices, on your estimates, on any letters you print out of here, that type of thing. So obviously it's really easy to do the logo. Then you have your company name. Make sure it's spelled correctly, capital letters and all, because it does print it the way you put it in. Your EIN, which you have the ability to do. Then you get to tell it what type of companies you are. So like these little pencil icons here. So he is an 1120S. His industry is marketing. The more detailed you are, the better QuickBooks is going to be at helping you. You're going to have a company email. If you need a customer email, so if you have like a support at Excellent Admin, you get another email that will print on the invoices and estimates. Phone number will print again on the invoices and estimates, and then email address will print on them as well. And then you get the address. And then you can have a customer facing address, which might be the same. So this would be what they would see on the invoice. And then the legal address, which might be different. The legal address is important if you're going to use payroll because it needs to match. And so your legal address could be different than your physical address because when you set up your EIN, you lived at home. And so your office was at home. So you ended up putting your home address and now you have a physical office, so you need to change your address because you want it to be at a physical office, or you can't do a PO box, but if you go to a UPS store, you can use the UPS store address and then make your PO box as a secondary line. That's up to you. And then obviously they always want to market you. So if you want to be set up for marketing, I opt out of most of it except for CPA knowledge and a few other things. And that's just so I have another resource specifically with all the COVID stuff going on. So I think that's really important. Then you have billing and subscriptions here. So this will tell you your company ID. So if you ever have to call in for support, this is the number they're always going to ask you for. If you hit, I think it's Control Alt print screen or something like that, it pops up on your screen too from anywhere inside of the QuickBooks Online, and they tell you how to do that on the phone. It'll tell you what your credit card method is that's paying for this, and then what subscription you are. If you want to upgrade, you can downgrade your history, you can cancel, switch to annual billing. You do save a little bit more to switch to annual billing if you can afford it. If you have payroll, this is where it would be to turn it on, turn it off, that type of thing. T-Sheets, that's the time tracking that we were talking about earlier. T-Sheets is free. It is an app. And then I think it's after so many users, I think it's 5 users, it's like $5 a month. It's really inexpensive for time tracking. It's a web-based platform that goes on their phones, and you use geolocation to do all of that. They have bookkeeping services if you wanted to use it that way. I don't recommend this, but it's there. And then obviously if you're doing any payments, so he has an active merchant account to see what, to take credit cards. And so if the merchant account is actually a separate platform, so I'm going to click into his merchant account. You see it opened a new window. And then you can see us processing the activities and reports, transactions. You're going to see fees versus deposits. They deposit directly into your bank account once you've set it up and had it verified. It takes like a week to get it set up and verified because they pull money, take money, put it back, those types of things. And then deposits hit next day. So if you run a card on one day, it'll hit the next day. And then the fees are counted separate. So it'll say $1,200 invoice paid, $22 fee removed. So you'll see that it'll start to add in transactions to adjust the invoices, but make sure that your invoices stay paid for the full amount and not a partial amount to accommodate for the fee. If you needed to refund somebody, you're going to do it through this portal. If you needed to review statements, you're going to do it through this portal. If you need to track your deposits, or like if you forgot to mark, didn't mark somebody paid, or something came through funky, like you did it manually on your end, you can still see who paid what and how all that went. This is one admin only, so I can see it as the accountant. I can do nothing inside of here as the accountant. Only the super admin who owns the account can actually do anything inside of here. And that's for security measures. The QuickBooks team wouldn't actually even talk to me if I called in as the accountant, because I'm not the super admin. I'm not the one on the bank account. I'm not the one on the actual credit card being processed. So there is a line of security there. If your team ever got in and got over here, they can't do anything with what this does over here without being you. Okay, unless you grant them access. So I'm just going to close out of that. And then obviously you can order 1099s and W-2 forms from here as their supplier. They're usually cheaper to get through like a Staples, Office Max, Amazon, those types of things. But they do give it to you if it's just simple. You just want to click order and be done with it. They're trying to be a one-stop shop. And so they're going to give you that ability to do that. Then you have a usage tab. So the one thing with QuickBooks Online that also is a struggle between users limiting you to what package you do, but also the number of a chart of accounts you have. So I don't have more than 250 chart of accounts, but I do have clients that have way more than 250 chart of accounts, which is the expense categories, bank accounts, credit cards, loans, any other liabilities you might have. And so they have to upgrade from the Essentials package, which is the one I recommend, to the one up, because then they get 500 chart of accounts. And so this breaks down to how detailed do you want to be with the categories that you're trying to accomplish for your own personal review of a profit and loss statement. I'm a big believer in it doesn't need to be crazy detailed, meaning you don't have to track every single expense in its own category. But there are areas that we'll talk about when we look at the financials that I do think need to be broken out because I think they're things that need to be checked month to month, as we are always right as a business owner until somebody as a vendor proves us wrong. And so I want to make sure that we pay attention to that. And there are ways to see it a lot easier than anywhere else. So, for example, in the food industry right now, restaurants have been just beaten up with COVID. They were shut down for a long time, and then they could only do to go. Now they can only serve alcohol till 10 o'clock, right? So that you can see they're dampering. Well, then the other industry that was affected there is truck tires. Truck tires get retreaded, and when the factories were closed, truck tires didn't get retreaded. So restaurants now are going to see an increase in food costs because truck maintenance now got more expensive because they didn't retread tires. They're making brand new tires to try to keep up with supply and demand. And we're in Ohio getting ready to get into winter, where we now import more goods from Florida, like oranges and stuff like that. So I can see an increase in food coming for my vendors or for my restaurants. And so I told them we need to monitor that food expense to make sure that it stays within the proper margins, and to see if we need to look at other suppliers to see if there's an ability to save money. So they need to have, food expense broken out from maybe produce to fruit to, frozen stuff like wings and stuff like that, in order to be able to see that. That's going to be a detail that we want to see so that we can compare it to last year. But you can also use an external software to track that if you're trying to do more of PO, the PO aspect of that. But we'll get into that like way later. That's super high level project costing stuff. But I wanted to give you an example of a few things you might want to break out. Okay. So he's his limits. There's no need to upgrade now, though it gives you obviously the ability to do that if you needed it right there. And then sales. So this is your preferences for invoices. So when you're in a desktop version, if you've ever used it before, you can set terms based on each individual client. So one client could be net 10, one client could be net 20, one could be net 45, one could be net 60, right? QuickBooks Online wants you to set a generic term, and then you have to edit it each time you create an invoice. So he set up that they're due within 30 days. The delivery method is always going to be print later. There's no shipping, no custom fields or anything like that. He turned all of that off. He accepts all the credit cards. So that's going into the processor that we looked at earlier. He allows them to show the products and services on the column, but not the SKU number. So the SKU number might be what he uses internally. And he allows them to see the quantity and the rate, which you could change this and only allow them to see the quantity, but not see the rate. They could just see a lump sum total. And then he has where he charges interest on past due invoices. He has it turned off, so he's not going to do that unless they're super late. A lot of people have it where if you don't pay it 10 days, you eat whatever percentage of interest right away, and their QuickBooks can do that for you. He doesn't want to create multiple partial invoices for a single estimate, so he has that turned off. Messages, he doesn't want that. Reminders, he doesn't want those to go out right away. He does email them, so that's awesome. And then he does have the ability to send them statements. So you go in and you kind of customize these on how you want them based on what you're trying to do. I don't charge late fees, but I can tell you, pending what your service is and pending how late somebody is, the late fee might be something specific. And then obviously I don't do any partial invoices, but those of you that are doing like a big project, the $50,000 project, you're going to invoice before at, probably 10,000, maybe 30,000, and, so on. So you're going to want a couple invoices to go against that estimate as you complete work to make sure you get paid along the way. And then obviously I would definitely leave the reminders on personally, because if you want them to be reminded every so often that they haven't paid you. It just saves the work for you to have to send the email or make the phone call. Sometimes people get busy as a business owner and it's not that they didn't want to pay you. It's that they got it handed to them. Something else happened. They set it down and walked away from it. And so if the emails come through, maybe you'll catch them at a time that they're just sitting there. So then the bills here. So he has default bill payment terms. He pays everything within 10 days. And then obviously he doesn't have the ability to do purchase orders in his version. So that would be something that if he needed, he would have to upgrade. So this is, again, the payment options that he has. This is his merchant IDs. This is the portal where he can adjust everything he's set up for the merchant ID from the time that he purchased it. It does tell you what bank account the money's going into if you ever needed to change that. You can do that from inside of there. And then you have advanced settings, which is, more talking about when does your accounting close. He has January through December, which is great. What kind of accounting method do you use, cash or accrual? Most small businesses are cash because we don't want to pay money on money we haven't actually gotten yet. Tax form, he's an 1120S. How many account numbers do you want to do? Account numbers. So a lot of you guys might use revenue in transit as account number 2125. And so instead of writing revenue in transit, you can type 2125. Or another common one is like ask my accountant, usually is 8,000. For some reason, everybody likes to use 8,000 for that one. Probably because it's just a really big, large number that sticks out and isn't in order. I see this with nonprofits a lot. Nonprofits use account numbers. It just makes it easier when it comes to coding the expenses. That's a preference. I don't particularly use them unless a client requests it, because I just think it makes the profit and loss look bulkier than it needs to be. But that's a preference. If you want it to pre-fill forms, pre-fill credit cards, those types of things, he has all that turned off right now. Time tracking, he does have this on because he is paying attention to that. And then obviously this is where you set up your currency. He's not multi-currency, but if you are multi-currency, you need to set that up. And then date format, number format, and those types of things. When you buy QuickBooks Online, which most of you probably have it, you set a lot of this up in default. It sets up as default. But if you ever needed to go in and change it because your business grows, this is going to be how you change it. So I want to make sure that you guys knew how to do that and how many preferences you had. The other place you have up here that has some preferences is your reoccurring transaction list. He doesn't have any set up. But if you go into the reoccurring transactions, they'll be listed here and you'll have the ability to enter them, you can just make a template. So you can use the template for journal entries at the end of the year, or if you're a specific niche for sales each month and you have to do journal entries, you can do that. And then obviously as you go, as you grow and you have other things that you need to do, they're going to be in here as well. So you can set that up. And I would say the last customization feature I would go through is probably in your items. So these are products and services that you sell. So whether it's an item like a t-shirt or consulting or training like I sell here, or it's tax prep because you're an those items have to be created here to go on your invoices, and you can edit them and name them to wherever you need them to go.
Where you want to go?
So you want to make sure that you you pay attention to these as well, because they're going to map them properly because you have the customizability to do that. So we want to make sure that these get set up properly. You can edit them if they aren't, but it's going to be a matter of what you can see.
Anne?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody again.
No problem.
So you can unmute yourself then.
Yep. Okay, guys. Perfect. Okay, so we have that. We've went over the users. We talked about the dashboard. Okay, so now let's look at our reports. So
And
if we,
and
yeah, go.
this is Steve. Before you go on, just how difficult or how challenging is the issue with online in your world as a an accountant for a number of companies that you have to change the terms of the invoice on each individual customer versus the desktop version?
So I don't really do invoicing for clients. I do more of the bookkeeping side. So for me, it doesn't really do a whole lot because I'm not managing the day-to-day collections unless somebody's past due and I'm just helping them craft a letter or, you know, printing and mailing stuff. I don't think it's bad. I think it's pretty common that everybody pays a net 30, and most of us being small business are going to get paid more immediate than that, or it's paid upon arrival because we're not going to sit and hold the expense. So I don't know that it's really a big deal at that point. Okay, so then if we go back over to our left navigation bar here and we go into reports, it's going to redirect us. So we'll spend a good chunk of time over here talking about reports, mostly because I think it's really important that we understand what we're looking at and we understand the idea of what we're trying to build in our QuickBooks file, but also that you understand the tools that are here. Because a lot of times I see people doing it, they don't realize QuickBooks could do it and they're doing it in other platforms, which is just more work for you at the end of the day. Okay. So the first thing we're going to look at is a profit and loss. So the profit and loss here, this is just for a month for him. You can see that he has a couple areas of income, but you see a total income number, okay? And then he has categories that are called expense, general and admin, dues and subscriptions, and then you go into more general and admin, then you've got marketing. So you've got high level ones, and then you've got internal accounts. So when you set up an account in QuickBooks Online, it is always going to ask you what it is. So Citizens is a bank account, okay? And then it's going to say it's a bank account, which makes it a current asset, okay? But say I do marketing and advertising, right? It may not realize that marketing and advertising is just a general expense. It may say that it's a general admin expense, or it might say it's an admin expense and that type of thing. So it may try to put it underneath one of these higher level ones. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a sub account for anything like that. So you get to pick when you're setting up your accounts how you want that to be done. And we will go over that after this part of the segment because we're going to talk about importing data and creating an account. Okay. So under here, dues and subscriptions, he wanted to track some of the dues and subscriptions he follows to know that each month he's only spending X on certain dues and subscriptions. So I would say this would be one you want to track because sometimes after a year, your subscriptions get the cost increases and we get so busy that we maybe don't notice, or we know that the subscription is working. So we don't care that it went up, but we should still monitor it and be able to look at it. Marketers tend to use like hundreds of them. So I don't list every single one. I list the 7 or 8 major ones for him because you also don't want your profit and loss to be 3 or 4 pages. There should be no reason why you can't get it to a page or a page and a half and get the detail that we want based on what we're trying to accomplish. Okay. Then he has legal and professional fees. That's a lump sum. Any coaches would go in there, attorneys would go in there, accountants would go in there. I mean, that's a great general bucket. Merchant service fees, I would call this bank and credit card fees so that they can both go in one. They're fees that you're getting from another organization. Telephone expense does need to be separate. It cannot be lumped into your utilities. Because it is on a different line item on the tax return. So make sure that you have your telephone separated out. Advertising and promotion, he tracks by what he spends while he's out and about. I think just a general meals category and a travel category is absolutely fine. It doesn't necessarily have to be for marketing purposes because you don't have to be marketing in order to to deduct those expenses. It could be a client meeting. It could be you took a conference call. It could be a continuing education course that you had to stay in a hotel for. So you guys, it doesn't have to be just like that. He has occupancy costs and then has rent. I just think you're adding another line here. You could just call it rent. And that's just where like you're just using space because QuickBooks Online tried to help him and he maybe didn't know right away. And so I've gone over this with him and we're going to clean it up, but I left it this way for training purposes so you guys could see it. Another area I would probably break down is going to be payroll expense. And I would do this because you want to see what the wage is versus an owner's pay if you pay yourself and the company taxes. So when you run payroll, you guys probably know that you withhold federal Social Security and Medicare for the employee. You might hold a city for them as well. That's deducted out of their wage. You're just a holding company for it. But what you pay on your end is federal unemployment, state unemployment, and a portion of Social Security and Medicare. Okay. So that's an additional like 15% tax that you're paying as the employer that you get to deduct. But you want to watch that because when you offer somebody a job and you say you're going to pay them $15 an hour, you're actually paying them more than that after you pay the company taxes on it, the employer taxes. So I like to see wages versus office payroll or owner payroll versus the company taxes. Okay. Then you get into where you probably have a garnishment on somebody. Again, that goes into wages because that's deducted directly out of their paycheck. You can create it as a separate line item if you have to trap it to a cap, meaning you have to tell the state when they've paid their whole garnishment off. But that's up to you and an internal thing. It's just more of a keeping it clean. And then the other thing you might have under payroll is going to be contract labor or casual labor, as people call it. That's anybody under $600 that, didn't stay or you're, a contractor that came in and did a one and done project for you. You could keep that under payroll expense. But everything else then should be kind of listed out. You're going to have office supplies. You're going to have repairs and maintenance. You're going to have automobile. Automobile, if you want to break up fuel versus insurance, or car payment, you're absolutely allowed to do that. In reality, you can deduct repair and maintenance on a vehicle, gas, the payment, or you can deduct mileage. You can't take both, and you're not going to track mileage inside of QuickBooks Online. You're going to use a different app for that, or a mileage book. I use Miles IQ. I can log multiple vehicles in it. It's $100 a year. And every time my car starts to move, when I get to a stopping point and I turn my car off, it'll say, was this a work trip or a personal trip? And what vehicle were you in? And I click, boom, done. And then at the end of the year, I can print a 1-page report that tells me what my mileage was to give to my accountant for them to make the determination on which was a better deduction for my business. If you have older vehicles, sometimes the repair maintenance is going to be better, but most of the time the mileage is going to be better unless you don't drive at all. What doesn't count is commuting mileage, but that's something that you can talk to your accountant about. Technically, driving to work isn't a mileage expense, but leaving work to go to the post office or go to a lunch meeting or to go to this appointment or that appointment is. I don't know how many people really check that. I just try to make sure that people are educated and understand that so they know what's going on. Okay. And then other expenses you might have, cost of goods sold would be a big one. That's whatever it takes or cost to do your business. So for me, cost of goods sold is the technology I use to work remote, which is called ConnectWise, and my billing software, and then my Intuit subscriptions. That's about it. There's not a whole lot that I have in cost of goods sold. For restaurants, they have the cost of food, the cost of liquor, the cost of pop. They're going to have any merchandise they're selling, overhead costs like that are going to be all costs of goods sold. If you're hosting an event, it could be running a dumpster, doing this, just giving you some ideas on what falls in those categories. And I will give you guys in the next week course what you can categorize under what expense names that give you ideas based on what the IRS standards are, so that you have an idea of like you need to make some changes in yours, or if it can be something that's we do as we're working through some of the transactions. Okay, so this is the first report. The second report I want to look at is going to be a balance sheet. Now, if there's something wrong on your balance sheet, a negative credit card, a negative loan, a negative bank account, stuff like that that comes through, then your profit and loss statement is probably not accurate. So your accountants at the end of the year, the first thing they're going to look at is going to be a balance sheet to make sure that there aren't negative transactions, because you want to make sure that if there are, we're fixing whatever's caused it to be negative. And it could be simple, like you made a deposit on your profit and loss statement that should have been a loan, not a deposit. And so you've overstated income, right? When it should have gone on the balance sheet and transferred over. The only time you'll see negative is if you're doing depreciation. So he bought a MacBook. The MacBook then was fully depreciated. It nets out as 0. That will be the only time you see negatives. But these are his credit cards. They're all positive. His accounts payable is positive. His accounts receivable is positive. I mean, I've seen bank accounts negative, accounts receivables negative. Undeposited funds has been negative before. I've kind of seen, the areas that make it look wonky. He's got loans down here. Everybody should know what the EIDL is, or the SBA loan was another one that a lot of people may have gotten. And then if you get down into equity, his equity as a distribution may be negative because he's put money in, took money out, put money in, took money out, like you guys are doing in draws and distributions. And so because it's an equity account, that one's allowed to be negative. But it's making sure the main accounts don't have anything wonky on them. The other thing I'll tell you about QuickBooks Online on this report specifically is that if you've ever used this account in a calendar year, even if the account is 0, it will stay on the financial report. You cannot take it off. I don't know why. I've tried everything. But then come next year, when he doesn't use it at the end of the year and he doesn't use it in January, then they won't be on the report for next year. But when he goes to print this out, although these are 0, these all still show on his report. Okay, so don't panic if you see them because you're like, well, it's 0. Why is it here? That's just a quirk that is the way QuickBooks Online does the reports. Okay, so it gives you an idea for the balance sheet. The couple other reports that we're going to look at is going to be an accounts receivable report. So the report that shows that people owe you money, okay? And then shows you how much people owe you and how late it is. So right now, if you guys go to the bank and you want to try to get a line of credit or you want to try to mortgage a building, the banks are looking at our accounts receivable because we're in a pandemic to make sure that your business is financially sound and that in 30 days, you're still guaranteed to get some semblance of income, okay? So, and a lot of banks, depending the size of your line, may call for your accounts receivable reports once a quarter. What they don't want to see is that you have a bunch of people in this 91 and over bucket, right? Because if it takes you that long to collect, unless there's a specific industry that does require that, like if you do a lot of government contracts, they do not pay any faster than 90 days. You're lucky to get paid at 120 days, okay? That's different. That's guaranteed pay. They know the government's going to pay you. But they want to make sure you don't have a bunch of people floating out here. Even I have people in that bucket. When I do a tax return and I set, it's 2 weeks before the deadline like we're at about now, and I just get it out because the client, you need to get it in the mail as the person getting the taxes done. I'll send you a bill and people forget and then they pay me the following year when they come in to get their taxes done again. It happens. We're human. That's small business. Don't panic if you have money over there. Just try to make sure it's not a majority of your business. But you get to see who the customers are and then what area they're at. And these numbers are clickable. So I clicked on that. It took me to the report for this client. If I had more than one invoice, I would see more than one of them here. And then you can click into it and it's going to take you into any transactions that you have. So let me click into this one here because I want it to take me to an actual invoice for you. And then it takes you to an actual invoice. So he has the customer, the email that it went, that he sent it so they could pay online, billing. His terms here are due upon receipt. So she was supposed to pay this right away. He just put what his product is and the cost it was, right? And you can receive a payment if you needed to. And then you can hit save and send, save and close. You can just hit save. You can make it a reoccurring for those that are monthly clients that are going to pay a flat fee each month inside of here. You can view it, print preview. So this is what his invoice actually looks like, what the customer sees versus what you see. And then you can copy, void, delete, and audit, and you can see the audit history. And the audit history is going to tell you he created it, he added it, and then if I edited it, then it would say and edited it. And this is why the users are super important, to give you an idea of how you can see it. And you can see audit history on everything in here: invoices, payments, bank transactions, reconciliation reports, and so on. So the audit history is really important. Okay. So we're going to go back to reports. So then if you notice, we have these 3 reports favorited for him because these are the 3 reports he looks at the most. But another report we can look at is the accounts payable report. And again, these are going to be summary reports that you're going to look at. He doesn't use the bill entry feature in QuickBooks Online because a lot of his stuff is reoccurring transactions like dues and subscriptions. It's $15 a month and bills on a credit card. He doesn't actually get hard bills from a vendor to pay for a product, or a bill from a CPA, or a bill from a business coach. He doesn't actually get those. So I put myself in here so that you could see that there's a customer in here, current, 30, 60, 90, over, and then his total. Okay. And then again, if you click into here, click on this number here, it takes you to a list of more bills. And if he had a bunch more, you would see a bunch more. And then you can see what put this in. So I put it in as a journal entry because it's just me doing a sample, but it could be a bill that you would see that you would put in. Okay. So those are the 4 reports that everybody, I think, should use, okay, based on what you're trying to do. Now, that being said, if you scroll farther down, you have tons and tons and tons of reports, okay, that you can use. A couple ideas for reports is, especially since we're going through like a crazy year, if you were open this time last year, I would definitely recommend doing a comparison to see how much cash you had in the bank then versus how much you have now, or how much income you brought in then versus how much you bring in now, so that you can do the comparison and see how you're doing. You can do a year-to-date comparison from previous year. So what did you do from January through September 30th of this year versus last year? You know, you can check it by customer to make sure that each customer is paying enough. The banks like to see that we have a very spread out income level, not that we have one customer that's 75% of our business. So, you know, if you have that, that's great. We might want to diversify a little bit because in case something happened to that customer, it's not a bad thing. You got to start somewhere. But your profit and loss by customer is going to be a big deal. You can look at profit and loss by month. I just pull it each month. I don't necessarily need to look at it by month, but they've built this so that it's click and go, click and go. If you click these little stars, it'll add it up to your favorites up here. Okay. So these are the standard reports. Then you get custom reports. He hasn't created any custom reports, but this would be like if you're trying to look at a trial balance sheet or a general ledger, trying to do that, or if you import data from a POS system into QuickBooks Online, you're trying to make sure that you're looking at certain things each week, you know, you can absolutely do that. And then you have managed reports, which that you want to see the reporting period for this year. This is just, again, a customization feature that's inside of here. How many of you ported your data from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online? and noticed that you have a lot more customization features than I've kind of covered today, versus those of you that actually started on QuickBooks Online and didn't import anything. It is true. If you port from desktop to online, it brings everything you've built in desktop. So classifications and all this type of stuff. Where if you open QuickBooks Online, you lose some of that right away. And so I always recommend don't start your data over. If you've got it there, great. If not, there are some things you might miss out on or pay for that if you had imported it, you wouldn't have to pay for. And those are some of the tricks of the trades with QuickBooks Online as well. So, okay. So then that is us reviewing the reports. Do you guys have any questions about the reports?
No question.
Perfect. So then let's talk about chart of accounts. Okay. So if you go into accounting over here on our left-hand side, and go to chart of accounts, this is our chart of accounts. So it's listed out. All of these items are clickable, so you can alphabetize it. You can do it by type. You can do it by detail, QuickBooks balance, everything. I tend to do it by type because I want to see my bank accounts listed together. I want to see my credit cards listed together. The loans are going to be listed together. Cost of goods sold is going to be listed together. You know, you kind of get the point there. So you can go from here to view registers all the time, and it's going to take you directly into whatever's going on. From up here, you can change to a different bank account where it's going to load your data. QuickBooks Online is a web platform, so I'll warn you that obviously you see it's got a little bit of a lag to it, pending when you're using it and how many people are on their web platform at once. Some days it's better than others. I usually only see it get real bogged down right before the end of January because of tax time and right around tax deadlines. Just so you know, don't panic. It is constantly working and updating. Then if you have like down here, you have credit cards. So say I needed to edit a credit card, okay? So this says Capital One business credit card. He only has one credit card for Capital One, but he does have quite a few credit cards. So I still might want to dash this and put the last four of the credit card number, okay? If you have two Citizen bank accounts, you don't want to just put Citizens Bank twice. QuickBooks A won't let you, and B, you need to tell the difference. So you want to put Citizens ending in 3464 and Citizens Payroll ending in whatever it might be, right? So you want to track it that way. It makes it easier for reconciliations at the end of the year for somebody else to take over your bookkeeping because they know exactly what it is and where it's going. And then obviously, if you guys have anything that changes, like credit cards, you get a new card number. You could, instead of creating the account all over again, because the statement's going to be the same, you can just adjust the credit card number to keep it current so that we know that the Chase credit card ending in whatever is the correct credit card. Otherwise, then somebody like me prints out all this paper and I'm trying to figure out which accounts go where, and I'm trying to match transactions, and you can get in where you have duplicate data, and it just creates more work and headaches. So I do tell people, try really hard to keep it organized. Just because you know what's going on doesn't mean that somebody else will know what's going on. So if we can make it, like any person proof, then it's perfect. So that's the first thing, is that you can edit anything in here. Then you want to do is you want to create a new one. So you want to click on it. So here it says account type, and it has all these options for you. Okay. So for convenience, let's create a bank. No, let's do something harder. Let's do other current liability. Okay. It automatically filled in that it thinks I'm doing federal income tax payable. Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to do SBA funds, okay? Because we're actually doing SBA funds with a lot of customers right now. Now, just because I selected the liability, then it said detail type, and it selected this for me, right? Well, no, that's not really necessarily what it is. It's going to be more of a other current liability again to match it. It doesn't have to match. It could have been a notes payable. It could be other things in that list, but based on what I picked, we're going to do that. We're not using account numbers. You're welcome to put a description in so that you know what you're looking at later. And then if you notice that I changed this one and now I lost my name up here. So I'm going to type this back in because it's trying to be smarter than us, right? I'm not going to put a description in. I think my name is pretty self-explanatory at this point. I can sub-account it if I want to. And it's going to give me all my accounts that qualify. So I'm going to sub it under my EIDL because it's going to be additional. And then I can choose a start time for it. I'm just going to leave it where it says choose, and I can hit save and close. And now it's underneath here. And then if I click view register, I can enter transactions inside of here. Okay. So you can do that. That's the manual way to do it. You're going to do a lot of this way if you're already got quite an established chart of accounts and you're only trying to enter a few. If you don't have a chart of account established, or your accountant, or I work with some franchises where they give them a chart of account because they want their books to look a certain way, then we're going to import that information. It's going to be a one-time import. But you can import it over and over again. It just won't allow you to do duplicates. It'll only import the new ones. So if you click over here to new and import, you can get to it from there. You can also get to it, as your PowerPoint says, through the gear icon here and click import data. This is for all the data because you can import your customer list if you've been keeping it elsewhere, or you don't have all your customers in QuickBooks yet online because you haven't billed them all yet. You want to do it that way. Vendors, chart of accounts, products and services, and so on. So if we click chart of accounts, it brings us to here where you would browse your computer to find whichever one you would want. Okay. And then you would hit next. And then when it comes up to map your data, what it's telling you to do is to say that Citizens is a bank account, which is cash on hand. Okay, so like we saw on the previous screen, the mapping, I'm going to go back to the previous screen because I want to make sure you guys follow, because I'm visual. So for me, I want to make sure you get it. So your account type is going to be a bank, right? This is the mapping. And the detail is that it's cash on hand. Okay. And then the name would be Citizens. Okay. And that's what you're going to map out so that when you put it in, it knows what financial statement the account should be on, whether it's an expense, income, cash, liabilities, those costs of goods sold, those types of things. Okay. And then once you've mapped it, and it'll give you red if it doesn't agree with your mapping. So if it's like, no, you can't do that because you don't actually have an account called that name, then it'll be in red. It'll import everything but that one. And then you can go in and decide what you want to do with that specific item. And you can download from here the template they want you to use. So if you download the sample template to try to make it more seamless, sometimes it's easier to download this template, piece it together, than it is to not, to try to build it yourself. So make sure you can see the template. Okay. So they use account numbers. We don't use it. It's just a sample thing. The account name, the type, and then the detail type. Okay. It's really important that the detail types match the detail type options that QuickBooks has inside. And then if it doesn't, that we create those inside of it. Most of the time, those are pretty generic. It's really going to be pretty simple. And then the types can be anything that qualifies underneath it, you can create. So again, those are pretty industry standard, or those are pretty standard across the board with accounting. So it's not necessarily something you're going to have to pay attention to. But if your company or franchise, or even you, had created a chart of accounts and you wanted to just cut it into pieces to make it match the format, you could do that, save this, and import it up into the file, and it would do exactly what you're trying to do. So let me flip us back to QuickBooks here. Okay. And like I said, then you would hit import. So you're going to have the same types of steps when it comes to expenses and other importing datas. Customers is the other big one I would say you guys want to download the sample for to make sure that it's formatted properly. Because if it's not formatted properly, then we could have some issues with the data actually being taken. Like QuickBooks Online is very specific. If it's not in the 3 templates it needs to be in, then it won't take the data. You can act like it'll load and then it'll all be in red and say there are errors with this. I mean, it's really good about making sure that you can't just import stuff not mapped properly or spelled properly, stuff like that. And then it's really hard to delete things inside of here. If you're deleting it, are you sure you want to delete this? Yes. Are you really sure you want to delete this? It's past 90 days. Yes. Like you have to hit multiple stages to get that deleted. And so don't panic because anything you delete, you can obviously fix, but you do want to pay attention to that. Do we have any questions about the chart of accounts?
Nothing that I see as of yet.
Okay, perfect. Well, I would say that is everything on our agenda, Steve, so far for this course, for what we wanted to cover today. Guys, the only thing I would ask is if you guys could put, I normally do an icebreaker to make sure that throughout the course I can do some examples that apply to your industry. If you guys could tell me your name, your company name, and then just a brief description of what you do. So I'm Ann, I own Excellent Admin, and we're an accounting firm. Simple like that, so that Steve in the chat box so that I can make sure that as we go through the next 2 weeks for the beginners and the next 3 weeks for the expert course, that we're using examples that directly apply to you. And it's really important we do that as you guys are going to be working through some of that. And because I think sometimes it's easier for training when it relates. The last customization feature I'm going to go over for preferences is going to be sales tax. I'm not going to get into who qualifies for sales tax. I'm just going to specifically show you how to set it up. And that's because there's a couple areas that this actually goes into, and I want to make sure that we stay on task with all of that. So under products and services, if you create a new one, I'm going to say it's a service because he does a lot of service based. Okay. Here I could say training. My category here is going to be marketing services because that's just what he does. My income account is going to be sales. And then pending your industry, this is a non-taxable service based on what he does. But it might be a standard rate taxable service. Now your standard rate taxable service, your rate is going to be set up when you fill out the form that says I'm in Tuscarawas County and my sales tax rate, well, it just went down, but it was 7.25%, where Stark is 6.5% and Summit is 6.75. So you just have to know where you're at to know what your tax rate. There's a great map online you can use to find out if you don't know. Steve Schilling probably has access to that. I mean, I can look it up really quick if we need to. But you do have that. And then obviously if any of your rates ever adjust, like I said, Tuscarawas County went down, then you want to make sure that you adjust the rate. So if it's a non-taxable item, it's not going to calculate anything. If I say it's a taxable rate, it's going to calculate. So then if I created an invoice, I'm going to show sales tax on there. So how do we actually set that up? So let's look at, and I apologize, this is on my other screen here. So let me flip you guys. All right, so then okay, so that says, let's go up here to accounts and settings. Maybe. So he actually doesn't even have sales tax activated. Okay, so you do have to activate the sales tax portal from inside of here. He doesn't actually have it activated, which is interesting because it prompts him to do it, but then he doesn't actually have it activated. So I will make sure to take screenshots of that. And Steve and Deanna, if I email those to you with a different customer, because I'd have to black out their information with how they activate the sales tax. If I send that to you, could you email that out to these guys so that they have that, since I can't show it here?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Because I want to make sure that they see that. I'm not a sales taxable industry myself, so I know how to do it. And QuickBooks Online is totally different than desktop. But you do have ways to file the returns and stuff like that we'll go over further in the course as well. But I'll get those out to you guys today, no problem. Well, guys, that kind of sums up everything I wanted to talk about today. We're a little bit ahead of schedule because we anticipate some IT issues and then obviously the icebreaker. But now it would be time for any questions you guys might have.
So, Ann, we did get a question on the chart of accounts.
Okay.
This is a construction and property manager business, property management business, and wants to know the best way to categorize contractors, currently setting them up as vendors by name. Any suggestions?
I would just create subcontractors. And then if you go in here to, let me see here, expenses here. And you go over to vendors, because they're going to be individual vendors for each person that's working, but the expense on the profit and loss can just show that specific person. If you create a new vendor, because you need them to be listed out as individual companies or individual people doing the work, so that you can issue 1099s at the end of the year, but you don't need to see on your profit and loss, and did $3,000 worth of work, and Steve did another $1,000 work, and Deanna did another $3,000 worth of work. You don't need to see that. You just need to see your total subcontractor expenses, $7,000. But inside of here is how you would set them up individually, so that at the end of the year, when you go to prepare 1099s, anybody who qualifies for a 1099, which I don't think he has anybody that does, that you can see the list of how much they made based on that person. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I would thank the 3 attendees that did follow up. Oh, another request just came in with information you're looking for. So the attendees that before you sign off, if you do want to give us a quick blurb about name and business, that in future trainings to make sure that she covers some of those specific issues. So this will end part 1 of our beginner online class. Part 2 will be Tuesday, October 13th, a week from today. It'll start at 10 o'clock. And Ann, thank you very much for the assistance today, for the training, the presentation. I thought it was very helpful, especially I'm a desktop user, so online is completely foreign to me. So happy to have some of those tips to on this particular software program. Thank you. And we'll leave the Teams version open for a few minutes so that anybody that wants to add additional information can. And another reminder, in the future, if you have specific questions that didn't get answered today or that you want to talk directly with Ann, she just posted her email address and her phone number. So.
Yep, absolutely, guys. And I appreciate any feedback, as this is the first time we're doing this 100% virtual. And so I'm very visual myself, which is why you'll see that I'm obviously lecturing while you know, doing the actions at hand, and then making sure you have the PowerPoints to look back at. But it is really important that if there's anything that you guys think we're missing, or that needs to be a little bit more, you know, give us feedback so we can adjust it before next week, and make sure that the course is everything you guys are expecting.
And one of our attendees mentioned that they're using desktop right now, but they're converting first of the year to online. And I think you've talked about that in the past, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yep. And it's actually a really easy process. I just always tell people back your data up in case something goes funky. But pending what year of QuickBooks Desktop you are, it should port over just fine. I'm actually doing a transfer today at 2 o'clock for another client. Steve referred me over to Jen, and we're going to move her up today. So it takes me about 2 hours is what I tell people. And that's like the download, the sign up, the making sure. Then once you get the data imported, it takes QuickBooks Online probably about 25 minutes to actually dive in and get everything to where you can see it. And then you can get in and spot check everything. But usually it goes very smoothly.
Gotcha. Okay. I especially appreciated the early on the 4 different options under QuickBooks. It's helpful to know, which one's the best one for a beginner or when you're just starting online, because they can be confusing.
Yeah, in QuickBooks originally, the online version was meant for like a self-employed contractor that was just squeezing by and barely categorizing expenses. Now it's become a robot and another alternative option to do almost everything that the desktop can do. So they've changed the game quite a bit. It's come a long way in 4 years. I can tell you that. I was not a QuickBooks Online lover for a long time. And now I'm like, it actually makes my job a lot easier to do stuff remotely or help somebody real quick with having it be online.
And for our last comment, this is being recorded and it'll be on our website in about an hour or so. Since you had to bounce